Hello, it's December 15th, 2022, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developers Meeting. We get together every week to talk about the latest things happening in the world of backdrop development. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, core committer and technical lead for the Backdrop CMS project. I'm joined here with a half dozen people, and we'll go through and do some quick introductions. Joseph, if you'd do us an intro, and then Martin.
Sure. Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a software developer from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Thanks, Joseph. Uh, Joseph, sorry. I feel like you should own it, and you can say, "I'm a core committer
Oh, okay.
for the
Yes,
Backdrop project
I'm
as
also a
well."
core committer for Backdrop Core.
Yeah, that's right. All right, and we'll go to Martin and then Robert.
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm a web developer in Northeast England, United Kingdom, and I mainly work in the contrib space.
Thanks, Martin. Robert and then Luke.
I'm Robert Lang, bug builder on the internet in Altadena, California.
Thanks, Robert. Luke and then Andy.
All right, I'm Luke McCormick. I'm a web project manager in San Ramon near San Francisco. Go by Cell Ear in places where one uses handles.
Thanks, Luke. And then finally, Andy.
And I'm Andy Shillingford, Doc Wilmot on Backdrop. I'm from the Cayman, well, I live in the Cayman Islands, a family physician by profession. I dabble with Backdrop on the side.
Thanks, Andy. Always great to have you joining us from the Cayman Islands. That's fantastic. Let's see.
Thank you.
All right. Contrib updates. Usually Jen is around to do the contrib updates, but in her absence, I'll run through these. That we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new contrib modules released in the last 7 days. Looks like there's a lot of work happening in the Civi CRM space because 2 of the new modules are. Oh, I thought 2 of them were CKEditor or Civi CRM related, but sorry, there's Civi CRM, a form block, CKEditor, anchor link, custom breadcrumbs, Happy New Year, and shortcode. Sorry, I read 2 of those as being Civi CRM, but one is CKEditor. So thank you everyone for the new modules and releases on those new projects. I'm curious about the Happy New Year module. It seems obviously very timely that the New Year is right around the corner. It looks like the module, it decorates your site with garland and snow that creates a long-lasting atmosphere of New Year and Merry Christmas for you and your users of your website. Thank you, Justin Kaiser, for the Happy New Year module. That's great. Okay, so general discussion topics for today. We have a forum post every week that's forum.backdropcms.org under meetups and events, where we solicit topics for discussion on a weekly basis. There weren't any posts this week, but we had a couple of things that happened that we'd like to discuss anyway. The first one is the end of life of PHP 7.4 happened, what was it, Joseph, this past week or the week before? Making it so that PHP 8, I think, is now the only officially supported version of PHP 8 and higher. Is that correct?
I think it was last Sunday.
Yeah. And just kind of every time, PHP seems to be moving a little faster than it used to. Either that or time is passing faster than it used to. And
I think they're trying to target a new version every year now.
And that has implications for a lot of software projects, but Backdrop's model is usually stuck. Well, first of all, our backwards compatibility policy is very strong, and we try not to drop support for any version of PHP based on its usage, not necessarily based on its level of support. And so we have a little bit of extra information on that thanks to telemetry. We can see what versions of PHP most backdrop sites are running if they have the telemetry module enabled at least. And so that can be used as a little bit of a guiding principle for when we want to deprecate support for certain versions of PHP. We do have, of course, a constant in the backdrop code that specifies the minimum version of PHP, where if it's below that, it will just not run anything at all, and it'll just say, minimum version not met. But as far as PHP 7's official end of life, that has very little effect on us because there's still a lot of PHP 7 websites out there, and PHP 7 is still supported by a lot of operating system vendors, which includes like Debian and Red Hat and others, that as long as there's a version of PHP that is in one of their LTS cycles, which is for Debian, I know Ubuntu's 2 years, but I'm not quite sure how long Debian is, and Red Hat's even longer. As long as there's an LTS version that supports that version of PHP, then there's still going to be a lot of websites out there that run that version of PHP. Yeah, Joseph, do you want to add to things? Just some of your own
Yeah,
thoughts?
I don't know if this will really affect us, like for core development stuff so much, but I believe that the version of Drush that is supported by the Backdrop Drush extension doesn't support PHP 8, which means that if you have to move up, then you probably won't be able to use Drush anymore.
Interesting. Which is kind of I mean, as if there weren't enough drivers already, but you should probably, if you're using Drush on your backdrop websites, I know it's the easiest thing because people are familiar with it. Really take a good look at B, because it is functionality wise identical to Drush. Architecturally, it's the same as Drush, and commands are pretty much the same between the two
There
of them
are
as well.
there are a couple of there are a couple of gaps in B compared to Drush, where things are being filled in, but two major gaps are aliases. So we don't yet have the ability to use aliases in B like we do with Drush, and also we don't have the ability to instruct the site to update through B. So they're all things that we've got on the list of to-dos, but they're both quite big big additions that we at the moment we don't have anyone working on those. So those are gaps. I think if we can get those in, then I don't think there'll be many significant gaps left in B.
Yeah, thanks for that context. Maybe I'm just saying I've become a big fan of B. I was like, oh, on my backdrop, my first commercial backdrop project that started or finished a couple weeks ago, I just had huge success, and I was like, oh, this is great. It is a little bit tedious right now because Drush and B, even though the command structures are super similar, they are different. And if you're a contrib module wanting to provide commands, it is a little bit tedious still to provide both of them. I did something with one of the modules. I can't remember. It might have been
Memcache.
Memcache. Yeah, that I wrote everything for B, and then I wrapped Drush around B's commands, and that worked okay. But it's really, yeah, it's kind of tedious. They're probably best to be kept separate, honestly. Let's see. Also related to PHP versions, Martin, I think you were asking before the meeting about array syntaxes that we have the potential, since our minimum version of PHP is 5.6, that we still, in our coding standards, require the long form array syntax where you literally spell the word array and then open parentheses. And there's no PHP or technical limitation on why we can't switch to short array syntaxes. Maybe there might be a technical reason in that we still cross-port stuff from Drupal 7 pretty frequently, and that if we switch to the short array syntax, but Drupal 7 does not, which I don't see why they would, porting stuff from 777 into Backdrop would be a little bit more tedious because of the differences in the just syntax there.
I think
Mm.
for a long time there was the policy for Drupal core was that you could use either as long as you were consistent within a file. I just checked and that doesn't seem to be what it says anymore, but I do remember for a long time that was the policy. So we could probably do something like that.
Yeah, for a transitional
Right.
phase. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be great. I've gotten kind of tired of writing out the long syntax. And my tooling, unfortunately, really tries to use the short syntax pretty much
Mhm.
everywhere. Like when I copy and paste code, PHP Storm, like it's like, hey, let me shorten those arrays for you. And they slip into our pull requests pretty frequently, not just from me, but from other people as well, that we see the short syntax, probably for similar reasons,
Mhm.
that it just the tools are trying to push you in that direction.
Right. And it's more consistent as well with other languages like JavaScript and C++, and pretty much everything else uses the square bracket syntax.
Yep, absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say next is JavaScript is, I mean, because all of our config files are all JSON, for example, like we see a lot of short array syntax or the only array syntax in JSON format in our own code base already. And so it's not like the square brackets are something that we can avoid even if we wanted to, that it already permeates our code base just on the JavaScript side. So yeah, I'm in favor of moving to short syntax. I just yeah, I'd like to figure out logistically maybe what that looks like. I know that it's like it's gonna end up changing a lot of files.
We have a lot of good first issues.
Yeah, yeah. It's the sort of thing that it might actually be less prone to breaking things using an automated tool to just fix them and go. And I'm not exactly sure how we should split that up. Maybe like one module at a time, because one file at a time, honestly, it would just take forever. One module at a time, and then maybe one per like major include, like form.inc and bootstrap.inc. Those sorts of things could be done maybe one file at a time because they're thousands or even tens of thousands of lines long. Yeah, yeah, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'd like to get other people's opinion. I'm not sure if we've got an issue for this yet. Has anyone here looked?
No, I haven't looked. Yeah, I just raised it because we were talking about versions and I spotted it in the docs the other day, but I haven't raised an issue.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it in here. Yeah, let's get an issue started.
So just to be clear, if you don't mind me asking, we're speaking about starting an issue to manually convert all the array syntax in current backdrop code to new syntax. Is that what we're saying?
I think the issue that we should file, first of all, is to say we should convert to the short syntax and then decide on the policy for how we handle it. So we shouldn't just rush right in and say, this is the plan. We should say, we'd like to convert to short array syntax, or should we convert to array syntax, and then make the policy decision first. And then we'll follow up with the technical one.
The reason why I ask is I don't know, is this the only thing that needs to be changed in the newer versions of PHP? Why are we singling out?
I don't think
array
it needs
syntax?
to be changed. The long form works fine in PHP 8. It's
Sorry, I didn't mean need to be changed, but is that the only thing that needs to be focused on? I'm just trying to figure out why we're focusing on array syntax in particular. Does it cause a problem?
So yeah, it doesn't cause a problem even the way that it is right now. It's just Well, I guess maybe there's a good way to, like, we need to justify this, right? Like, it is mostly just personal preference, but it's not quite personal preference in that it's like almost an industry-wide preference towards moving towards short array syntax. But there's no reason that we need to move to it technically. Like, it's not deprecated and it's not required. But it does seem like it frequently slips in because of the way that tools like to use the short syntax by default these days. Of course, we'll just end up with the opposite problem, that people will slip in the long array syntax for quite a while after this. But I think moving to short is definitely where all like documentation and the PHP community in general is heading.
Mm. At the very least, though, it should be possible to, in the coding standards, to say to change that to say that the short form array is acceptable, but if we decide actually we're not going to do it for core at the moment, but because any module that's trying to follow the coding standards, it would be good to say either is acceptable. So if a module decides actually we're going to switch all our to the short form, that shouldn't then fail if they're using the backdrop PHP CS tests on it. So and I don't have strong feelings. I've been using the long form for ages, and I know we've stuck to a long form on B because it was backdrop policy. But I just wonder, even if we allow them both, but we need a consistent policy so that they're used consistently in each area.
I suppose what I'm really asking, just to be clear, is if we do an issue, I'm really asking, I'm not quite sure, should the issue title be, should we convert all array syntaxes to the modern version? Or is the issue, should the issue be, should we convert backdrop, or should we deprecate 5.3, PHP 5.3 specific code, which would include also array syntax? I'm just saying, if we're going to be picking one thing that's outdated, why don't we get rid of everything that's outdated in PHP 5.3 instead of just focusing on array syntax? Because we'll fix all the array syntax problems, but not problem, but you know what I mean, it's outdated. But then there would still be code in there that's not in 5.6 and not in 7.4. And I imagine they're in there because of some advantage to them being gone. So that's what I'm curious. I mean, are we going to update past 5.3 in bulk? That's the question.
I think the array syntaxes are a bit of a weird case because essentially what the PHP developers did is they added a new syntax for it and then didn't deprecate the old ones. And it's kind of the only case where they've done that. So
there's some other examples, like the way you can define constants. For example, you can say either const and then the constant, or you can say define and then parentheses the name of a constant as a string. And that's another.
Okay.
But I think that was like something that happened between somewhere in 5.3 to 5.6. Like they added that additional way of defining constants. But to answer your question, Andy, I think either way, we want a dedicated issue specifically for array syntax because it is going to require its own discussion and its own strategy separate from some of the smaller tasks that may exist. I do think it might be worthwhile to do that, like a big meta analysis, to be like, these are the language features that we can now switch to a newer syntax. But I don't even know what those other ones are, and so that probably deserves its own issue, just to like analyze what are the language features that have changed, and what's the kind of the newer approaches besides array syntax that we should be looking at.
That's reasonable.
I could
Um,
probably come up with a list pretty quick of what they are. So I
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Robert, did you have something you wanted to add about array syntax? I saw that you raised your hand there for a second.
Oh, just with long syntax, it was easy to remember terminal comma with long syntax, no terminal comma with short. And now I have to keep track of them both.
Yeah, that's true because JavaScript doesn't allow that trailing comma in their arrays, and PHP does. Yeah, I mean that itself could be a whole nother discussion. It's like maybe we should stop using trailing commas for the sake of consistency with JavaScript, but no, not worth it.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because actually I think it's PHP 8.1, they added support for trailing commas in function declarations so that you can make your functions look like your arrays.
Wow.
Mm.
Can I say I am not a fan of that either?
Mhm.
I don't like that. Oh my. I had no idea. Thank you, Joseph, for that context.
It's going to look weird in function definitions.
Well, we just won't do that either. I think
Oh,
that's
it's 8.0. Andy just put it the link in.
Yeah.
okay, let's see. Anything else you guys would like to discuss about PHP versions? Okay. Let's talk about this next issue Martin raised. This one's really straightforward, I think. Let's see, share screen. Here we go. Okay, so on the agenda here, we've got this problem with backdrop is CLI, and it's a pretty simple situation that the pull request just says, Martin, the summary basically is that server software might be defined, but might be some kind of empty string or something like
Mhm.
that. And in which case that causes backdrop as CLI to say false even when there is no server defined. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so that function in as it stands at the moment requires it to be null, but elsewhere in that file, there's a number of functions that use preg match, and that if you send null into those, it causes PHP errors. And so we switched it to doing like basically an empty string, but backdrop CLI didn't recognize that, and it caused a few of our functions to break.
Interesting. Okay, that actually brings us to a different thing then. Potentially, if we're doing a regular expression on server software, but it's not defined, which does happen in other situations that aren't B specific,
Mhm.
we should probably also fix those locations to either cast that as a string or do a string length first or something to make it so that we're not throwing a PHP notice on software that's not B, because this happens at any time there's like server software is specified by web servers, and if you call PHP outside of a web server, like just from the command line, like if you just do an executable script, that's also going to be missing server software, I would believe. But in any case, I think the solution, it's completely harmless. So I think that we can proceed with this as a stopgap measure. Yeah. I'll merge this right after the meeting. I'll go ahead and mark this RTPC just so that it pops up into my feed. Okay. All right. Next up. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about 124. 124 feature freeze comes up in just 2 weeks. Just a couple days more than 2 weeks. It looks like, oh, it's probably about the time where we decide what day really is feature freeze again. Because it's always this one in particular, it always lands on New Year's Day, right? Which is always a holiday. Which means that we frequently end up with the actual feature freeze being pushed out a little bit. And so what I think this means for us this time around is that New Year's Day is on a Sunday, January 1st, and that moves the observed holiday to January 2nd, which would mean following our normal flow of things, feature freeze is actually January 2nd. So that's our deadline for merging a new functionality into 124. Does that sound right to everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, there's two issues that that I'm working on that I'd like to talk a little bit about. Issue 5748, which is a simple sounding issue to add descriptions to user roles. And this conflicts with a module that you've made, Robert, and we haven't discussed this in real time yet. So this could be a good opportunity to do that. So this pull request just adds a description property to user roles, adds that description to the user role config files, and it's a pretty simple set of changes. However, my tests are currently failing. That's my bad. It needs test coverage, new test coverage. So that's also a thing that needs some changes. But before I got any further with it, I'd like to talk about what happens with the role help module that is a contrib module and what we should do as far as like, supporting it's similar functionality, but it's not quite exactly the same, like what we should do with that module. So could you fill us in a little bit as to what that module does, maybe?
Yeah, and I'll mention it is a port of a Drupal 7 module. So we'll also have people coming from Drupal 7 with role help that, whatever the upgrade path should accommodate. It's a very old module. Drupal 7 module was never got out of output. Anyhow, role help. It does what pretty much what is described here. You can define a description for roles that is then listed with each role in, for example, the checkboxes to select which role it is. And there's an admin page of all of the roles. So administrators can see those roles, can see the descriptions when they look at the list of roles. And let me just quickly pull it up. Yeah, actually, I guess there's two bits. There's a summary and then more extensive help text. And users can see for their roles, they can see the help text. And then the admins can see the summary and anything that shows role checkboxes.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the coverage that this has, it looks like it also makes it so that on the user edit page, when you're assigning roles, it can potentially add the descriptions, or I'm sorry, what are they called? The summaries underneath each role checkbox. So, I mean, that sounds like it would be useful, but it's not something that's included in the current core pull request. Yeah, and that long form help, that looks like it makes a dedicated page to like describe you know, overall, like here's the role structure on the site, which again is also not included in my current pull request. In a way, like I don't actually see too much like too many things that conflict, I should say. So in theory, you could have both this contrib module and the core functionality added at the same time, and I think it wouldn't conflict too much. And I'm saying that because I'm kind of leaning towards the comprehensiveness of what this contrib module does is more than what core at least will provide with my pull request. And I'm thinking maybe it might be more than most people would need. So I'm kind of leaning towards maybe we should just leave it as a contrib module and it would just continue to function as an expanded functionality on top of what might be in core in the future.
Yeah, question thing I wonder is, are there places, and I haven't spent time looking into this, but are there places where both descriptions would show up? Because that would be weird.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So, for example, on the on the user account edit page, where it lists the roles, there's the summary line for each role. And if we put this in core, would we get 2 summary lines? Or would the one summary line, would the core summary line replace the contrib module, or contrib module replace it? I mean, as I said, I haven't spent any time to try to see what happens when we have those. I guess that's probably the next step.
Yeah, I think that is the next thing, is that we need to install both this module and try out the pull request at the same time. Reading over it, I'm not seeing any overlap. But yeah, I think that we should check into it. I'm glad to see actually this role help module doesn't try to like form alter the list of user roles. You know, I think that that's where it would be most likely to have a conflict. But because the list of user roles requires a custom theme function to print out the list of user roles, I think that maybe a role help module was just like avoided messing with it, which is good for us. Okay, yeah, that sounds like that's the next step there, is just to see if there's any real conflict there. Because from the looks of things, I think what I'd like to do is just say core doesn't acknowledge role help module, or try to upgrade its data into these core role descriptions, because they kind of look like they're serving different purposes. The descriptions that I'm suggesting we put into core are really only so that when you're looking at the list of roles and when you're assigning permissions, that it gives you a description of what each role is. So it's less comprehensive than the role help module.
Yeah, so role help does do form alter on the list of roles. I mean, on the user admin roles form. So.
Oh, it does. I see.
It does.
Check boxes after build. What does it do? Okay, it puts a description on the checkboxes. Interesting. I wonder where that renders. Okay. Well, yeah, we need to try it out.
Look it up. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So that will move forward that issue a little bit. And then the other issue that I've got on my docket as something I'd like to advocate for, but I'm working on this user roles thing first, is issue 2615, which is the title, Allow Limiting Allowed Text Formats per Field Instance or per content type. So this is what it sounds like, that you can make it so that certain fields on your site only allow certain text formats or certain editors. And this is because I like to set up my text formats so that there's usually only one text format allowed, like in a place like a summary field, for example, you might want only like simple things like strong, italics, and maybe links, some inline options. And regardless of your role, you should never be putting like tables into this summary. It should always be this one exact text format. And it's so simple that it doesn't make sense that it would ever be lower or higher. It just should always be that value. And then that hides the text format dropdown entirely for that field, which I like. BW Panda was the one that started this pull request. It's been open for a while now. It's 2894. Sorry, that's the pull request number. And so this has already got some good work that we can pick up on. It's also the sort of thing that if anyone else wanted to advocate for this one and start working on it now, I'm going to be very eager to be the sounding board to get this tested and iterated on. Yeah, so that's it. This issue hasn't received any activity in a couple years, though, so may need a little bit of updating. We also are going to have a kind of similar like contrib problem here, and that there's contrib modules that provide similar solutions. There's only one available for Backdrop at the moment, but there's the potential that there's others that could come from Drupal 7. But this is the sort of thing where I'm not quite sure exactly how comprehensive we can get, because there's kind of like multiple competing solutions that are all reasonably popular. And so I'm not totally sure how easy it will be for us to accommodate all of these. Better Formats is the one from Backdrop. Yeah. Well, anyway, another thing to look at. Well, those are the items I had for the agenda today. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss before we close? Some head nods. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining this meeting. As always, we have a couple more weeks before Feature Freeze. We'll try to get what we can done. And thanks again for joining. So thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.